Welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you on here. I can't believe this is your first Zoom recording, Renee. This is great.
Yes, I'm a Zoom fledgling, well, YouTube fledgling, I guess.
That's so great. That's so great. Well, if you would introduce yourself, who you are, a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Renae Reynolds. I'm the transportation planner for the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. And that organization has been around since 1991, advancing different campaigns and policy pushes that support communities of color and low-income communities in their fight for environmental justice. So that's the organization I work for. A little bit about me. Let's see. My background is in urban theory. I studied at Parsons New School for Design in the theories of urban practice. So I like to call myself an urban practitioner that looks at, studies different areas in which the urban environment has impacts on communities, whether from physical or ecological, psychological, sociological, the various impacts that the world that we live in have on us.
Wonderful. And you're also the coordinator for the Electrify New York campaign,
Yeah,
right? So tell us
yes.
about that.
So Electrify NY is a statewide coalition of advocates from different spaces, so from environmental justice or environmental advocacy, transit advocacy, and labor. And we came together to sort of advance work around vehicular electrification. And we really focused and honed in on public transit electrification as a way to tackle the public health impacts that the transportation and the climate impacts that the transportation sector has through its emission of greenhouse gases.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, right? So, greenhouse gases in New York State are about 40% of all the emissions that we create. And when you take a look at that impact, in particular on low income folks of color, it's pretty dramatic, right?
Sure. So we have a lot of things that are challenging our communities. And yes, in the state, greenhouse gas emissions are predominantly coming from the transportation sector. So the on-road traffic, the emissions coming from our, diesel buses, trucks, all kinds of vehicular traffic that traverse our neighborhoods. And so what that means is that we have an extreme level of exposure to different pollutants, including fine particulate matter. And those have negative health impacts on our community. So you'll see higher rates of asthma and respiratory issues in communities that are being affected. So areas like the South Bronx or Williamsburg or Brownsville, for example, will have higher rates of exposure and higher morbidity, mortality rates due to those exposures.
It's pretty dramatic, actually. I mean, I understand that the childhood asthma rate in those communities can be up to 25%.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
And so that leads to, increased public health costs, not just for the individual, but on a system as the whole, in order to respond to those issues. And you're there, folks are getting hit from left to right from every mode of transportation. So whether it is the school buses that our kids are using or the public transit buses that folks in the outer boroughs and all of the boroughs really, predominant users of public transit are folks that are from low income communities and communities of color. We represent 75% of the ridership on the MTA fleet. And about, I think that number might still be the same, about 66% on the trains, so that we're the majority on public transit.
Wow. So we like to start with why. So why do you do what you do, Renee?
I'd like to think because I care. I'm, general curiosity about, our world and what our responsibility is in sort of either improving the conditions or, making a sustainable place for us to live in. And that general curiosity has led me to different ways of investigating that. So, strangely enough, before this, I worked for the United States Forest Service, doing research on social resiliency in the aftermath of natural disasters.
Wow.
Um, and it's sort of organically also led to this space because we have to consider some of the chronic ails that we experience. There are tons of things. Let me backtrack a little bit. So what you find out about natural disasters oftentimes is that these are climate disasters that are increasing because of human activity. And that human activity can also be linked to what's happening in our transportation sector, right? We need to move around. And so we engage in modes of transportation, and those modes of transportation, depending on how they are fueled and how, what fuels we're using, lead to impacts on our environment. So it's all interconnected. Um, and I think that's, fascinates me and why I engage in this type of work.
Ah, excellent. Thank you so much. And so what kind of policies are you working on with clean energy in particular?
Um, uh, might have to edit this. I didn't. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Well, Electrifying New York is working on a number of things, so why don't you just talk about those?
Okay. So we have a few initiatives that we're working on. So I, I will talk a little bit about two bills that we actually introduced or have introduced into legislation, the Green Jobs and Green Transit Bill. So these are two areas in which we are looking at advancing public transit electrification. Um, I don't know if you, sorry, Aaron, if you need the bill numbers.
No, no, that's okay. No, no, no. Just so basically, tell us what the bills would do, what the goal is of the policies that you're advocating for.
Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, is this awkward if I'm pausing? I don't know if this will.
Well, it's a little weird on the YouTube because we don't really edit the video recording.
Oh no. Um,
That's just really raw. So, but we'll cut out some of it
so
if we
I'll
need to.
try to
So,
bring it back to. Sorry, I lost you on the screen. So the Green Transit and Green Jobs Bill essentially is looking at the ways that we can mandate a full transition of all public transit buses across the state. And in tandem, also encouraging bus manufacturing to happen in New York State. So two things working together to ensure that the buses are being clean, but at the same time we're generating good, clean, green jobs, and making sure that there's a just transition from workers who currently work on manufacturing of diesel and other kinds of buses into cleaner electric buses.
outstanding. And what sort of things? How are you creating these changes? What sort of activities are you guys doing?
So there are a few things that, well, so I feel like maybe we should talk about some of the like past campaigns that we've run and how we could utilize those types of activities. So one of the to advance the work that we're doing right now.
Sure.
So in the past, like as I mentioned before, we worked specifically on, getting commitments to transition the MTA bus to all electric. Or I might not have said that explicitly. What I said is we focused on electrification for public transit. So what that meant was we needed to engage with a large authority, the MTA, to secure that commitment. And we did that through rallying and through meetings with the authority. And presumably, those are similar activities that we would engage in to advance other, fleet transitions, potentially. Um, we also have a municipal toolkit that we created to support information gathering from different fleet managers to find out the ways, kind of create pathways towards electrification. So whether it's like creating tools or establishing a website, a platform, our website is called electrifyny.org. And you can go there and you can see some of the information on our campaigns and find out the tools that, would provide information about electrification. Given the current state of the world, we're, currently in a pandemic. And so we're not necessarily seeing each other face to face and engaging in the same ways that we used to. But we do organize ourselves utilizing tools like Zoom. We attend MTA's monthly hearings, and so we've had to pivot in order to continue to do the advocacy work that we're engaged in. So there's more to come. Like we are also in the beginning stages of doing research on medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification. And so I think another way that we engage this work is through research. And we're in the beginnings of advancing some research work with a group of students from Columbia on a capstone to do just that. So it's a range of activities.
Fantastic. And I think you've gotten the MTA to commit to a certain level of electric buses, right? The Metropolitan Transit Authority of New York City, right? So how many are they committed to now of their fleet?
So the entire fleet was committed to full electrification by 2040. So that's thousands and thousands of buses that traverse the entire state. So it's a huge commitment. It requires a lot of funding. And currently the MTA, like a lot of agencies and authorities, are under, dire strains, losing hundreds of millions of dollars daily due to the reduction in ridership due to the pandemic. So there are tons of challenges to achieving those goals, but we are constantly, lending our support and sort of asking the MTA to double down on the commitment, even though, they're experiencing a lot of obstacles currently, that we don't want to see those things kind of backslide in order to retain whatever revenue they are getting. That this is what we're experiencing right now is a primary example for why we need to clean up the transportation sector and the energy that would kind of fuel that transition in order to mitigate any climate challenges moving forward.
So in addition to advocating for policies and getting commitments out of the MTA and the other transit authorities around the state, Are there, in some of the legislation and policy changes you're proposing, are there additional incentives for electrifying transportation on either the public or the private sector, tax credits, those sorts of things? Or
Yeah, there are programs, you know, in this at the city and state level, uh, whether it's the New York State VIP program, um, or the Clean Trucks program. There are different voucher programs that look to provide incentives to fleet owners um, to purchase new electric vehicles and to overturn those older models. The challenges I think those programs face is that, you know, a lot of these fleets, they're less than willing to get rid of vehicles that, you know, maybe only a few years old. These trucks and buses sometimes have a 12-year life cycle. And so it is an economic, it can be it's considered an economic loss in a way if you're, you know, buying a new vehicle and you only have like a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, you know, diesel truck. Um, but what our challenge is, and maybe even our opportunity, is to show that there are long-term gains in terms of maintenance savings and also in terms of the public health benefits that make good sense for companies to look to transition.
yeah, in the energy world, you know, there's three parts of energy. There's the electricity that we consume, there's the heating and cooling that we do in our buildings, and then the biggest part in New York and elsewhere is transportation, and that's a big sector. And then when you take a look at transportation, you have both the private sector and the public sector. On the public sector, mass transit, obviously New York City has one of the largest subway systems, which is all electric, so that's kind of clean and green, which is great, except when you then get into some of the commuter rail, which goes from electric to diesel still in some capacities for the Metro Norths and the Long Island Railroad, maybe. I'm not even sure about the railroad, but I think there's some diesel still on the LIRR. And then you look at the private sort of heavy duty equipment, which, like you're saying, the trucks, which are pretty substantial, all those trucks that move all our food and all our goods in various different ways. And then you have the private sector too, which is where the vast majority of vehicles are, because many people have cars, and those cars could produce a lot of greenhouse gases. So it's interesting to take apart the sectors and try to dive deep into any of them. And the work on mass transit that Electrifying New York is doing is really critical and wonderful. So great job, great job. And you got the MTA to agree to go to full electrification by 2040 of their, I think there's 3,000 buses in that fleet, right?
Fingers crossed. Actually, I
Yeah.
think that's, I can get you the actual number, but I think it's more than that.
Is it more than that? Okay, great. And any other successes
More
that you
like close to
feel?
1,000 buses, actually, I think.
Oh, okay, great.
Um,
Um, any other successes that you guys have gotten to date that you want to share? Or?
let's see. I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but I feel like that was a pretty big one.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah, no, it's huge. It's huge. That's fine. I just want,
That
I want
was,
to, I didn't want to give you, I wanted to give you the opportunity if there was something else that was there
that
that
was a
I'm missing.
heavy lift. I mean, there was another. I mean, this is not necessarily Electrify NY's singular uh, victory, but I would say even the passage of congestion pricing was a huge victory that we were looking at like a year ago and thinking this is amazing because, you know, and for for the viewers, congestion pricing is essentially a fee that would be ascribed to drivers going into Manhattan at the point of the central business district, which would start at 60th Street and all the way down to the lowest end of Manhattan, Wall Street. Um, and so we saw that program as a great opportunity to generate revenue that could then be dedicated to our mass transit system. Anything that provides opportunities for folks to get out of private vehicles and to uh, take mass transit as something that we see as being good for the city, being good for our collective mobility, being good for our climate. And that funding uh, would also be utilized to purchase electric vehicles. At least that's what we were demanding.
Yeah, so that congestion pricing is an interesting carrot and stick, right? So on the stick side, basically what it says is, look, sitting in traffic trying to get 5 blocks in Manhattan is not really great for either you nor the environment nor your air quality. So we're going to basically make it so that if you're going to travel during peak times and make it even more congested, you're going to pay for it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take that money and we're going to make it easier for people to do mass transit. So we're going to use it as a funding source on the carrot side to make things better and faster and swifter. So I think it's really a brilliant strategy, and it's really another great victory. And it wasn't just electrifying New York that was part of it, but again, like all these things, it's a lot of people all coming together, working to figure out and implement. And it's great that you live in a state where actually you got some commitment from people. And though there's often challenges with that, still it's nice not to be fighting every inch of the way with people who don't want to do anything. So
Right.
that's a good thing, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. So, like, what kinds of lessons do you think you've learned, and challenges that you encountered, and what did you do? What did you learn from those experiences?
I don't know if you heard it on my end, but there was an airplane going overhead. So I couldn't hear the question.
Oh,
Think
okay.
I think
Sorry.
you asked about challenges.
Yeah, sorry about that. And also, I think my microphone slipped down a little bit, so I got to tighten this up. Here we go. All right. Yeah. So, what kind of lessons, what kind of challenges have you guys had, and what kind of lessons did you learn?
Hmm. I want to say everything went smoothly. Actually, Ron, everything was great. It was perfect.
Really?
We
Wow.
had no challenges. No.
Wow, really? Boy, would you show me how that's done? Because I never had that happen in my life, but that's okay.
Magic. Let's see. I think, we had a lot of challenges, but I think we came together collectively to try to overcome them. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges is really engaging um, systems that have been, operating in, a specific way for, a very long time, and being able to say that there are ways that we can innovate, in the ways that we transport ourselves and our goods, and these can be seen as opportunities. So I think, messaging was one of the biggest challenges that we experienced, and just crafting and framing that messaging that would make sense and that would hit home to agencies and authorities that are sometimes, really focused on the logistics of getting people from point A to point B, and are sort of agnostic about, the fuels that support those systems. And I think we were successful in advancing the public health narrative, and making sure that, you know, what we were saying is that, it's great to get people from point A to point B, but we should also look at ways to reduce harm, or avoid any additional harm in doing so. So exposing them to tailpipe emissions should not be, an okay sacrifice, in order to operate our systems.
Yeah, one of our prior shows where we actually found that if we do implement these clean energy programs across the board for our electricity, our heating and cooling, and our transportation, we can save $5 trillion as a country. One of the guests said that the only thing that stands in our way is everything that we've ever done before, which is always what stands in our way, which is a really great quote, I thought. So,
That is a great quote.
right? It's like everything we ever done, it stands in our way of what we want to do next. So speaking towards that, what is the next step for you and the coalitions?
Yeah, I mentioned, the medium heavy duty vehicle space. We're looking at ways that we can utilize research to sort of start driving campaigns to advocate for electrification of those larger vehicles. So, because as I mentioned in the beginning, those are the vehicles that are impacting our constituents, our community members in the South Bronx. Whether it's the food distribution center in the South Bronx. We're looking at the ways that we can start to engage private truck owners, companies, in those communities, and start identifying the pathways for cleaning up those vehicles and making sure that we're not adding, more burden to communities that have been suffering for a long time and then are also being disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. One of the things that we noticed and research came out in, and analyzing the impacts of the coronavirus on our low-income communities is that we are disproportionately impacted by that as well, and mainly because of our pre-existing exposures to pollutants. It makes it much more difficult to deal with a pandemic that is fueled by a respiratory illness,
Yeah.
So I think that medium heavy duty vehicles is the next phase for us. And we're also thinking about other places where we can impact, and advance electrification, potentially looking at our public school buses. So yeah, there are several arenas that we're looking at. And we're also, I think the fight for public transit electrification is not over for the various reasons that I mentioned, specifically the financial constraints of the MTA. So looking at ways that we can support the call for federal funding. Congestion pricing is still even though we've won, we have to secure that victory and make sure that the program is implemented. So yeah, winning is the first step. And then you have to sort of make sure that the thing that folks said that we're going to do actually gets done. Yeah. So I think that we're for it in terms of implementation fights.
Yeah, the standard organizing credo is you plan, you execute, and then you adapt because everything always changes, so you have to evolve, and then you succeed. So right. Plan, execute, evolve, succeed. Excellent. We like to ask if you had a particular quote, a quantum quote that just changes people's views and perspectives and takes things to a different level. So do you have a quote?
A quantum quote?
A quantum quote, yes, one that changes viewpoints. So there's been everything from, some folks quote never believe that a small group of committed people can change the world because that's the only thing that ever has. Never doubt that a small group of people. Oh, things like that. Things that just make you shift your perspective and take you to another level.
Oh my gosh, I wish I just had a quote on hand. I'm really...
You're blanking on it? You didn't come prepared?
I'm blanking on a quote right now, and I really don't want to leave without coming up with one. So
okay. All right, you'll give it a little thought. All right, well, that concludes this part of it. We'll go into it, and then we'll come back and we'll edit in your next piece. So this is the...
Yesterday is history. Tomorrow, a mystery. But today is a gift. That's why it's called the present.
I love that quote. I love that quote. Because that's all we have, right? All we have. I love that quote. It's a great quote. Today is all we have right now. That's why it's a present. That's a good quote. That's okay. We like that. That's a good one. That's okay, Renae. It's okay.
Oh my God.
You come up with another one. We could change it later.
Oh my gosh. We're definitely changing it later.
Okay. All right. We'll see what you come up with. All right. So you ready for the extended version of this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Here
Take
we
it.
go. Here we go. So, is there one thing that you've done with clean energy or economic justice that you think there's a unique tip, a tool, a tactic that people need to know, but most people just don't get, haven't realized?
Unique.
It could be unique, doesn't have to be unique.
Actually, I don't think it's unique at all. I think it's pretty traditional in the organizing realm, and that's really around mobilizing people. Like just people power, I think, is something that is so undervalued, and getting people physically out and together and collectively expressing their mission, their wants, their desires. Maybe not mission, but definitely their wants and desires is something that has been extremely powerful in our campaigning. Um, and I think that's something that, can advance the political will when, it seems to be stagnant. So I would say, um, from my own experience, just learning about the importance and the power of people.
Outstanding. So the show, as you know, is called Awesome Earthkind, and the awesome part is the first letters, four letters of awesome, are air, water, earth, and sun, AWES, air, water, earth, and sun. And the last two letters of awesome are M and E for you and me and the collective power of all 7 billion of us, all women and mankind living on this planet, all humanity, or all Earthkind. So
See how we did
people.
that there? That I didn't realize there was so much thought put into the.
Absolutely. Awesome Earthkind, because people are awesome and we are a force of nature. And when we decide to do anything we put our minds to, we can get it done. We just got to come together and stand up and act. So thank you for that tip and tool of mobilizing people power. Absolutely. No doubt about it. So thank you. All right. If you had to say one of your worst environmental, clean energy justice moments, you could tell us what it was and then what you got out of it, what you learned from it, please.
Oh gosh, I have to think about that. A worst moment?
Yeah, so a lot of people, they realize that these challenges that are forced upon us in our lives take us down this really deep, dark place. But at the end of that, there's some lesson that they learn that then is helps to be the foundation for what they do in the future, and it sort of changes their lives in some significant ways. So yeah, so is there a particular sort of down moment that you've had that then became a lesson that you learned and applied to your current life?
Um, Maybe I haven't gone down that deep dark road yet. I,
Really?
you know,
Wow.
I don't know. And you're talking about from like, experiences in the professional realm?
Yeah, mostly. Yeah,
I mean, I think that there have definitely been moments of distraction, like in that things that you feel that you wouldn't have to turn to advocate for or against, like, I don't know, increasing, the fares on public transit for folks who are already trapped, cash strapped. So I would say some of my most aggravating moments, I don't know if I would say like, deeper, darker, worse moments, but some of the most aggravating moments have been when standing in a public hearing or a town hall meeting and looking at folks who sort of represent us, um, in the transit space, for example, and saying to them, something that seems really simple is that, people who are utilizing public transportation oftentimes are already challenged, beyond measure. And so you can't continue to sort of squeeze out of them the revenue, the sole revenue, the sole base of, your operating funds. So I think that there have been things that distract us from like advancing the work in certain ways. And those have been like challenging moments in my experience, is shifting from focusing on the innovation and the technology and, and what that could do for our health and our well-being and, sort of, I can't requote you, but exactly like, us being, the obstacle that we need to overcome. So I think, yeah, maybe I'm interpreting your question incorrectly, but I think that has been, one of the biggest challenges, is just like things that seem like they shouldn't be distractions, or things that we shouldn't, have to advocate for or against, kind of becoming a bit of a barrier to advancing the work.
Okay. So on the other side of things, did you ever have a particular aha, I got it moment that really spurred and inspired you to take a little different look or perspective on something that brought you further along?
I mean, you're definitely helping me to reflect on the last couple of years of work. Um, aha.
Aha.
Is it okay if I say no?
Sure, Renee.
I don't think
We'll
I've
cut
had.
this one right out, so no worries about it. We'll just skip right over this question. All right, here we go.
I've got a lot of
Things that make you
interesting.
go hmm. Which, by the way, one of the quotes was, "The fear is not that we are powerless, but that we are powerful beyond measure." That's a
Sure.
quote that actually kind of touched on some of the things you said. But there was another one.
I could have
That's
used
a
that
quote.
one in the quantum. Oh,
You could. Yeah, you know that quote. So, okay, we'll come back to it if you'd like. All right, this is the Pulsar round. So, the Pulsar round, we ask you some questions and we look for really quick, short, succinct, amazing, and mind-blowing answers. You ready?
yes.
Okay. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh crap. Um. Um.
Um, 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 um.
The best
Well,
advice
I guess I should have reset you the
I
question and
didn't
told you to
even.
look them over again, huh? You wanna pause for a while and we'll come back and we'll restart
No,
this?
this is the pulsar round. I'm supposed
I
to be able to
know.
get these off really quickly.
Uh-huh.
I think the best advice I've ever had received is be yourself. Just
Yeah,
be you.
that's it.
And in any sense of, that phrase, like whatever space that I'm in, sort of just understanding that who I am is enough in that space, and what I am will sort of come out and help influence whatever it is that I'm aiming to achieve.
Yeah. All we really have is ourselves, right? So just be
Tell
yourself.
my mom, just be you.
Just be you. I love it. All
Mhm.
right. What's one of your personal habits that contributes to your success?
Curiosity, being nosy,
That's
wanting to
good.
know things.
Uh-huh.
I think that's something that is definitely like a value and a characteristic that I gained from my dad. Shout out to my father.
Nice.
He is a person that always asked a lot of questions and also sought the answers. So if we ever, as kids, had questions, you know, my dad would be like, well, how do you find that out? And, if it took us sitting in front of the encyclopedia or going to the library or whatever it was, then we were going to do that in order to figure it out.
Oh my gosh, encyclopedias? Going to a
Yeah, you remember
library?
those
What is
things?
that? What is that?
Remember those things? Speaking of, my mom
Used to be the only way we could find stuff. Yeah, I do remember that very well, but
Encyclopedia
I'm showing my age.
Britannica. Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. So in the World Book, don't forget the World Book.
So, just staying constantly curious.
Great. Awesome. An internet resource you'd like to share that you think people should be aware of? Besides Electrifying New York?
Dang it. New York City Environmental Justice Alliance?
New York
Need
City
it.
Environmental Justice Alliance, and that is www.
nyc-eja.org.
There you go. Any particular book you'd recommend to people?
Um, ooh, not transportation related at all,
Does
but
it? Yeah, anything.
Trace by Lorette Savoy.
Which one
Uh,
was that? I'm sorry, I apologize.
it's called Trace by Lorette Savoy. It's like top,
Trace.
yeah, it's like one of my top shelf books. Read it when I was working at the New York City Urban Field Station with the U.S. Forest Service. Really great book on history and geography, and just thinking about the geography of space and what histories we are stepping on, traversing, the now. Sort of goes back to my quote in a little way, in that, where we inhabit, the past, the present, and future all at once, kind of.
Yeah, great. Trace.
Trace.
Excellent.
Lorette Savoy.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change one thing for everybody in the world, what would it be?
Can I get political? That we all didn't see the debate that we saw. Or at least maybe that we all saw it and all had the same recognition of what was wrong with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So enlightenment, is that what it is? Or
Enlightenment. Aha!
Aha! Aha! There we go. All right, so this one hopefully will be good. So, weather time fudge or weather time fun? WTF or F? What a personal extreme weather event and what happened and how you lived through it and what it was like, whether it was scary, or just the most fun you've ever had and the type of weather it was when you were doing it.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Both are storms. I really like storms, but they're also very scary. So I would say weather time fun, or what was the other? How was
Fudge.
it?
Well,
Fudge.
it's WTF,
So
so
the
you get
fudge,
the idea, right? So
the weather time fudge, I think, would have to be Superstorm Sandy. Um, I was living in New York City. I wasn't in the Rockaways yet, but my family was living in the Rockaways at the time. So it was definitely a very scary time for us, thinking about what my parents were experiencing on the coast. At the time I lived in the Bronx, so the experience was a lot more muted, surprisingly, in the Bronx. You didn't lose power. There was a lot of wind and, you know, yeah. So I think that was very terrifying at the time, to just wonder what other people were experiencing during the storm. And then actually coming down and seeing the aftermath of the storm, seeing, the beach coming in, like, maybe like a block, down your sand where sand isn't supposed to be. Cars were, lifted up. The boardwalk was broken off. Lots of challenges. A lot of fudge during that time. And fun, strangely enough, is now living on the coast and sometimes experiencing that stormy weather, and being able to run out onto the beach when it's raining, but not terribly. It's not like, it's not like Sandy level, but for me, that's kind of awe-inspiring, and just thinking about, the power of storms as well.
and dancing in the rain, huh?
In the rain, yeah. I do that. Shh, don't tell anyone.
That's great. That's awesome. That's wonderful. Okay, what's the one thing you're most energized about today?
This interview.
Ah, that's a good
Yes.
answer.
I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm really glad we're doing this. It's
Yeah.
fun. Definitely a really nice opportunity. Like I said, you gave me an opportunity to kind of reflect on the work and ask a lot of like poignant questions. So I think it will give me energy to move into the next thing that I have to do and some really heavy reading that I have to
Ah,
engage
yes.
in.
Ah, yes. Well, besides this interview, is there anything that's getting you really excited about the world and change and positivity?
Hmm. So I think that there's a lot of good energy around electrification. It seems like momentum is increasing, that we're seeing success in fleet electrification in other parts of the world that is helping to increase our interest and sort of envisioning what that future looks like. So that definitely gives me hope for overcoming what we're currently experiencing, and looking at fleet, vehicle electrification as an opportunity, an economic stimulus opportunity. Um, yeah.
Great. No, I think it's very exciting. And again, the show is about taking those forces of nature and using that clean energy to power everything in our civilization. And we need to do it, and we have to do it, because otherwise we're going down a really bad place. But the great news is that we're starting to do it, and people are becoming aware. And if we do it right, we can have a more just, sustainable, prosperous, and wonderful civilization, which would be just great all across the board, and we'll save money doing it. So who can argue with that, right? So yeah, it's really great, cool stuff, right? All right, so grand finale, parting piece of guidance or advice to everybody, and if you want people to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Okay, so I mean, to get a hold of me, well, sh- should I give out my email address?
Well, or you can tell them to go to a website or
Yeah, you
whatever
can
else
just
is best for you.
go to
So
the website. You can message us on the Electrifying Web NY website. That's electrifyny.org.
there you go.
I check the email, so
There you
I
go.
receive your message. And if you have questions, check out our municipal toolkit. Check out all the links on our website. And a parting piece of advice is just learn a bit more about, vehicle electrification, what that could mean, for your life. Whether it's if you're curious about purchasing an EV for yourself, or if you are interested in advancing the call for public transit electrification. Think about the ways that you have a voice and have a stake in this conversation. Um, and I think what we have on our website will be very helpful in pointing out the various agencies and programs that are involved in this work. And you can think about the ways that you want to engage them. And if you're interested in electrifying why, giving you a little bit more detailed information and guidance on that, then message us.
That would be great. Anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
Um, this program is awesome. We
Thank
covered
you.
that, but I just wanted to reiterate
Uh,
that this has been an awesome experience. And, thank you for inviting me on to elevate and some of the work and just highlight some of the work that's happening in the transportation sector.
and
Uh,
thank you so much for coming on, Renee. It's a real pleasure. It's always a pleasure seeing you. It's wonderful, and keep up the great work. You do an outstanding job of making things happen.
Thank you.